Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, another school district has been caught using school resources inappropriately in order to advocate against Amendment 2. Sherilyn Stevenson has her ethics complaint dismissed. And we have another troubling story coming out of the Juvenile Justice Department under Beshear, this absolutely horrifically run department involving the guards pranking a mentally ill child that was in the Juvenile Justice Detention Center. So we'll have all those stories and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As always, please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you want to reach out to the show, you can email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head over to theandrewshow.com and hit the contact tab to reach out. Also want to encourage you, please tell others about the show. Get them to tune in, get them to listen. The important information we're putting out here several times a week, if not each and every day during the week, is a good way to stay informed on what's going on locally. I know there's tons of podcasts going on right now, but they're all talking about national politics, it seems to be, or in the case of the podcast that Kamala Harris just went on, the Call Her Daddy podcast, they often talk about blowjobs. But, you know, there's a lot of national news going on in podcasts. But here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we focus on state stories. And if you live in Kentucky, I think staying informed on what's going on locally, things you can actually affect, is incredibly important. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So Amendment 2, obviously, is a school choice amendment to allow the state to start looking at school choice options. And yesterday I talked about why, I think they're struggling on the messaging on some of these issues because they are failing those who are tasked with running this campaign. At least we're tasked with it by the establishment, as you could say. They haven't really been getting out there enough, and there's not really a coordinated grassroots effort. I mean, in large part, this is also due to the fact that there isn't really a grassroots advocacy groups in Kentucky that are super duper effective and large spread. Now, you do have some conservative grassroots groups. I know groups like MAFA. I know groups like Commonwealth Policy Center. I know there's groups like, you have groups like the Family Foundation and American Family Association, and you have some of those groups. You got Tea Parties up north, and they are individually themselves. You got Warren County Conservatives out west. And those groups individually are very effective at getting individuals elected. They're very effective at advocating within those areas, especially the grassroots groups. Now, the thing about Commonwealth Policy Center and the Family Foundation is really that is just a professional organization that has one or two or three, people maybe that are working for the organization, and then otherwise they're just pushing out stuff. They don't really do as much during campaign advocacy per se. They do a little bit, and they have some volunteers, but they don't go really hardcore with it, which is in large part why I don't think they're quite as effective at some things, especially Commonwealth Policy Center. I think the guy running it over there, Richard, I think he highly hurt his own credibility with the grassroots with some moves he made in 2023, supporting some pretty bad people during the primaries. And then on top of that, I think that it's just frankly, some of these groups are, for lack of a better term, they're way too nice to the establishment. And we see this too when we're talking about grassroots groups and activism with like the pro-life crowds, where they're unwilling to engage and really holding people to account to their standards, to their views. You fill out these surveys when you're running for office through these people, and they just do not hold candidates accountable to their survey answers. When somebody, especially currently in office, goes against it, they really don't care. But so you've got some grassroots groups, but there's not really a lot of coordination, not a lot of resources. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the party itself, the party apparatuses, the large swaths of those elected officials, they actually don't like those groups on the Republican side because, of course, conservative, this is what's really interesting, right? So Democrat grassroots, the Democrat base, what they're demanding out of their party, really the people within the party don't have a problem going along with, because what that base is demanding is, generally speaking, that they spend more government money. And so the Democrat base is never demanding that Democrats, generally speaking, do something that hurts their donor class, that hurts the people who give them the money in order to win campaigns. That's why they're constantly able to, not only do Democrats bring in more money than Republicans when we're looking at national scale, but they're able to keep those relations there. Meanwhile, on the Republican side of things, what the grassroots members are demanding of Republicans would hurt their relationships with their donor class. And so, therefore, they see that as hurting their ability to win election. And so that's why you see Republicans in office, generally speaking, the vast majority of them pushing away their Republican grassroots efforts, pushing away Republican grassroots activists, running away from their grassroots beliefs and people, even if they help them get into office, because what the grassroots is asking them to do does not fall in line with what the donor class and therefore the establishment is asking them to do. And so because of that, you just don't have the same kind of coordination organization that you have on the left side of issues, because there's no embracing of the grassroots on the right, period. That's just my viewpoint. Agree with me, disagree with me, but I think that pretty much sums it up of why that occurs. So anyway, on the left side of things, I'm pushing against Amendment 2, trying to get people to vote no. We've seen school districts, because, of course, they now have the superintendents organizations and the school districts and the school districts association, school board associations, all coordinating together in order to defeat this amendment, because they view it as hurting them, which I guess it hurts their fiefdoms of power. It hurts how many kids they end up getting to control, but it doesn't actually hurt their ability to educate. It's not going to rob them of money without removing kids that they have to educate. So it kind of actually, if anything, their amount per child would go up. But what it does do is it means less children, which means less administrators. And the administrators got to keep their jobs at all costs, don't you know? And then also, much like a knitting circle type politics, they want to have their control, their fiefdom of power. And if you remove people from their schools, remove kids, those are one less kid, two less kids, 10 less kids that they have power over. And so they don't want to see that happen. So these school districts have been posting about it. And we talked about Pulaski County Schools made a post on their social media on Facebook, and that prompted the Attorney General to go ahead and put out a statement saying, an opinion saying, you cannot use your official platforms that are taxpayer funded entities, your Facebooks, your X accounts, your whatever accounts that are the school districts, to advocate for or against a amendment initiative that is violating the law. And despite that, the Augusta Independent School District decided that they wanted to go ahead and do exactly that, despite the fact that it's already been called out. And so the Attorney General sent them a cease and desist. Reading from that cease and desist now, it says, "Dear Superintendent McCain, it has been brought to our attention that the official social media pages, Facebook and X/Twitter of the Augusta Independent School District are being used to publish partisan political messages regarding Amendment 2 ballot question. The office would like to remind you that official resources and platforms may not be used to advocate for or against the amendment or any other partisan political position. Please reference the legal analysis contained in the advisory issued by this office on August 13th, as well as the guidance provided by the Kentucky School Board Association in their public discussion of Amendment 2 FAQ document. We would specifically like to draw your attention to your district's own political activities policy, 03.1324/03.2324, which provides as the follows: no district employee shall promote, organize, or engage in political activities while performing his or her duties during the workday. Promoting or engaging in political activities shall include, but not limited to, the following: encouraging students to adopt or support a particular political position, party, or candidate, or using school property or materials to advance the support of a particular political position, party, or candidate. We certainly understand that individuals on both sides of the debate over Amendment 2 feel strongly about the issue. The Office of Attorney General also fully supports the First Amendment rights of all Kentuckians, including school officials, to express their views on this important ballot question. However, public officials may not commandeer public resources to promote their own partisan positions. Quite simply, messages that are appropriate for an individual social media account may not be permissible when posted on an official platform that purports to speak for the school district itself rather than for any single individual or group of individuals. Underlying the laws cited in our advisory and your own district policies is the understanding that our shared public institutions, and above all, our public schools, may not be politicized. There are many times and places where you and other school officials may advocate for your personal position on Amendment 2. We hope you will agree that this time is not while you are performing your official duties as superintendent and not on official platforms that are not equally available to those who may disagree with you. The Office of Attorney General therefore requests that you promptly take steps to remove any messages advocating for or against Amendment 2 from the official social media pages of the Augusta Independent School District and to ensure that official resources are not used for partisan advocacy in the future. Thanks for your attention to this matter and for your service to the children of our Commonwealth. So that's it. That's the entire cease and desist letter. If anything, that's a very soft cease and desist letter. Normally cease and desist letters that I've seen, and, you disagree with me. I haven't seen a lot. I've never been sent a lot of them, but I've seen some of them posted and what they generally say. And what they generally say tends to be a little more cutting, tends to be a little more, if you do not listen to us, these are the consequences. This is a pretty soft demand letter. And that's why these school districts will keep doing it. Do we honestly believe for 1 second that the Augusta Independent School District was unaware of the Pulaski County situation, was unaware that they were already called out by the Attorney General on this issue? That there's already an opinion put out, that the School Board Association had already put out something that their own policy tells them they're not allowed to make that post? Do we honestly believe they were unaware? No, of course they were unaware. But they plan on getting to make their post, potentially thousands of people getting to see it, and then having to take it down, and that's it. They're not going to face any repercussions. Now, what should happen if you're not going to fine these people, if you're not going to promptly fire them and demand they be removed from employment by any government for misuse of taxpayer funds, which the idea in the misuse of taxpayer funds, that should be the most egregious violation of any public employee that there should be. There should never be, that should be the equivalent of being a preacher and using the Lord's name in vain. That should be viewed as the most serious thing you could do. Misuse taxpayer funds outside of actually violating the law and a physical abuse kind of thing. But I'm talking about misuse of taxpayer funds should be the most egregious violation that a standard employee would do, that maybe they do that doesn't result in criminal procedures. But then again, if the misuse is so flagrant, maybe it does because of theft and stealing. But putting that to the side, we'd hope that maybe that would happen. But of course, the Attorney General is never going to throw any school district employees in jail for posting on social media about Amendment 2, and they know that. They know they're probably not going to get fined for it either. They know that. Now, what would be interesting is if the Attorney General did take him to court and the remedy was they had to post a positive thing about why you should vote yes on Amendment 2, what opportunities that would provide for people. That would be funny, and that would be worth it. I mean, if anything, if you tried to arrest people or fine people, they would turn themselves into martyrs that would only kind of forward their viewpoint. But if you made them where, well, you misuse taxpayer funds, because remember, the Attorney General themselves in this letter cited that the problem here is that it doesn't have equal access to all people on this viewpoint. So if you said, look, you're going to have to write a positive thing about Amendment 2 and post on your social media and leave it up for just as long as you left up the negative thing about Amendment 2, and you can't put it up by saying we're required to post this. Nope, it has to be an approved post. If we could do that to remedy this situation, which, it sounds a little crazy, but it's not exactly unheard of. Equal time sharing for political candidates is a real thing, where if, a network television has on a political candidate, doesn't invite the other political candidate on, and allows them to basically sit there, and it's not just like an interview, but allows them to actually sit there and just spew, what is essentially a campaign ad out for everybody to watch. They can demand equal time. This happened recently with the Joe Biden primetime speech, and he got a little political, and so the Trump campaign said, hey, look, we deserve equal time. That would be interesting, but I don't think we're going to see that. Let's see how many other school districts decide to step it up, and let's see if our Attorney General actually decides to go ahead and do something other than sending a softly, I wouldn't even worded letter, softly worded letter at best, softly worded. Well, Sherilyn Stevenson had her complaint dismissed by the ethics. For those of you unaware of what I'm talking about there, the Ethics Commission dismissed this complaint regarding Sherilyn Stevenson and a condo purchase. So a few weeks ago, I think I covered this in a show. I was talking about Kentucky's legal corruption problem. And I mentioned legal corruption for this very issue, that I did not believe, personally, that what she did on its face is necessarily illegal. But it does open up a lot of opportunities. Let me explain what she did here. So she purchased a condo in Frankfort with a lobbyist. Now, there is a law on the book that an individual legislator cannot receive more than $25 worth of value from a lobbyist. So, for an example, when lobbyists do golf games or dinners or, well, let me buy everybody drinks, let me wine and dine the legislators, they have to offer it to everybody. Everybody has to be invited. It can't be just, one legislator. Otherwise, that legislator is receiving something of value from that lobbyist. And so what occurred here is Sherilyn Stevenson purchased a condo in Frankfort with a lobbyist. That, one, on its face is already weird. It's weird to do that because Sherilyn Stevenson lives in I believe Georgetown or Lexington, lives 30 minutes away from Frankfort. So it's not exactly like you need, a giant condo. It's not a giant drive. You don't need a condo in Frankfort unless, of course, as I pointed out, you're just find yourself a little tipsy a little too often. And, suddenly that 20, 30-minute drive is really long when you're drunk. And so maybe if you're somebody who's drinking a lot in Frankfort, you need to purchase a condo in Frankfort for you to stay at to save yourself that 30-minute drive. But, Sherilyn Stevenson talked about the purchase and how she purchased it with a lobbyist, and they were going to stay in it during session and then maybe rent it out, Airbnb it during their off time. And so an ethics complaint was filed against her. And as I said at the time, and as I mentioned earlier on, in and of itself, if they're splitting the costs 50-50, receiving and buying into a condo with a lobbyist isn't exactly an ethics violation per se, isn't exactly illegal. Because you're not receiving anything of value from the lobbyist yet. But the problem here, and this is where I talk about this is legal corruption. One, this is obviously legal corruption. But two, you start now to get into questions about, for an example, when there is a mortgage payment, is Sherilyn Stevenson paying half the mortgage? Did she pay for half the purchase price? If one penny, $25, over the course of time is paid more by her lobbyist friend than her, then that's a problem. How are they cutting utilities? I mean, these are all questions we have to answer, and we have to verify in order to make sure she isn't breaking the law. Are they sharing utilities, or is the lobbyist covering it one month, she's covering it the other month? Well, if it ends up being, though, that the months that the lobbyist covers versus the months that Sherilyn Stevenson covers, if the months that the lobbyist covers are more and adds up to more, and there's more than a $25 difference, well, now we're violating the law. Or who's buying the groceries in the fridge? If Sherilyn Stevenson comes in and drinks milk, for an example, that's purchased by the lobbyist, or eats food that's purchased by the lobbyist that was put into the fridge, and that adds up over the time she eats over $25 worth of her condo mate's food, that is now a violation. If there is more than, if her condo mate, condo co-owner, the lobbyist, spends more than $25 on that house, more than Sherilyn Stevenson does, $25 over the course of a year. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever had roommates before. I have. And I can tell you that I guarantee you somebody spent more money than the other person. At least $25 more. And $25 more, I'm talking like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be an individual thing. I mean, if, for an example, if the lobbyist brings in the couch that now Sherilyn Stevenson gets to sit on and enjoy, is that a violation? And so that's the real problem here. The buying of the condo in and of itself isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is the ground, the fertile ground it lays in order for many other ethics violation to take place after the purchase has been done. And so that is the real question. And that's the real investigation. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, obviously, Sherilyn Stevenson is running for re-election. It's a tight district. She's running against Vanessa Grasso. Longtime listeners to the show know that I do not want to see Vanessa Grasso win that race. It sounds shocking, Republican, Democrat. But as I've stated many times before, Vanessa Grasso is nothing but a Democrat who changed over to an R because she wants to be in office, period. That's it. Literally, nationally, she's only donated to like Pete Buttigieg. And recently, too, for his presidential election. Locally, she's donated to some of the most leftist and liberal city council members there are. When asked why she changed her party, we've been given several different answers, but the number one answer we've gotten is she changed it in order to vote for Ryan Quarles in 2023. And so it's just a situation where this is a close district. Last time this race went on, Sherilyn Stevenson lost by like 23 votes. It really wasn't a lot. Let's see here. 2022, she won by 37 votes. So, it's a closely watched race. It's a tight race. Donald Trump won the district by 5 percentage points in 2020, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And Sherilyn Stevenson obviously has to reach across the aisle and get Republicans to vote for her. And she's shown some ability to do so in the past. And so, and I cover these things. It's not that everybody's corrupt and awful. And even I need to call out these things as problems when they're problems, regardless of what I want to see the outcome as. Because electionally speaking, when I'm looking at the grand scheme of things, the outcome I want to see here is Stevenson holds on to that seat, to be quite honest. And those of you who listen to the show aren't that surprised. And some of you who are new are like, why do you want a Democrat to win that seat? Frankly put, there is 20 Democrats in the state house. They are meaningless. They do nothing. They cannot be committee chairs. Their committee votes don't matter. They can't get a vote heard. They can't pass a bill. They are meaningless. Sherilyn Stevenson winning that seat is the equivalent of having somebody do nothing in the corner for 2 years. However, Vanessa Grasso running as a Republican but really is a Democrat, well, she can be a committee chair. She can sit on committees and vote. She can propose bills and work with Republican leadership to get them done. She can sway members of the caucus. She now is eligible for real positions of real power. Sherilyn Stevenson doesn't have any power. Vanessa Grasso winning that seat would have more power than Sherilyn Stevenson. A lot more power. And so I look at that and I say, what do I want? Do I want a Democrat who gets sat in a corner for the next 2 years? Or do I want a Republican who's really a Democrat that can actually get their liberal policies done and actually sway the Republican caucus that already holds 80% of the seats in a more liberal direction? Which do I want to see? And I think for the voters in that district, in the 88th House District, that's the real question they need to be asking. What do I want to see? Do I want to see a liberal Republican who can hold who can hold committee seats, that can stand up there and get laws passed? Or do I want a Democrat who we can throw in the corner and whose really doesn't matter? That's the question I think the voters need to be asking themselves. But moving on from that point, we have this absolutely horrific story coming out of the juvenile justice detention centers. Those of you who've listened to the show for some time have heard a lot of stories about Kentucky juvenile justice centers because under Beshear, they've been run absolutely horrific. We've had rapes, we've had abuse, we've had sexual abuse, we've had girls getting punched in the face, OC spray being used when it's not necessary, sadistic and torturous behavior, and Andy Beshear hasn't been able to stop it. It's truthfully crazy to me that during the time when Daniel Cameron was running for office, these kinds of issues were not called out. Some of these issues existed when Daniel Cameron was running against Andy Beshear in 2023, and they were never called out, but they deserve to be. Because this is absolutely horrific, and it keeps happening. I don't even know how many directors they've been through. They've been through a few. I don't know how many rejiggers of leadership they need to have for this crap to stop. Because it's ridiculous. I get it. You know, these kids, yes, they violated the law. Yes. I'm not saying they don't deserve to be in jail, and they deserve to be punished in jail. What they don't deserve, however, is punishments that don't befit their crime. And things like sexual assaults and getting punched in the face repeatedly by guards and being abused and left naked in rooms for 24 hours, things that happen to the girls in juvenile detention centers, that probably really doesn't fit the crime, does it? You know, the only time you would slightly think some of those things might fit the crime is when people did truly heinous acts, like murder or rape. But most of the time when they commit those crimes, they end up in the adult population anyways. But regardless, we have this story coming out of the Herald Leader. KY juvenile justice guards laughed as they pranked a mentally ill boy with a flushing toilet. I'm going to read through this story. I'm going to read a fair amount of it because I want you to understand what happened here, okay? The mentally ill teen boy locked in an isolation cell for 24 hours at one of Kentucky's juvenile detention centers on April 26th believed his toilet was possessed by a ghost. The toilet kept flushing on its own for nearly a half hour while the agitated boy kicked and yelled at it. According to documents obtained by the Herald Leader under the Kentucky Open Records Act, the boy had multiple psychiatric disorders, developmental delays, and anger control issues, a nurse said. So to set the scene, we've got a mentally ill boy, clearly a teen boy, so, you know, I don't know how old he is, but let's say 13, 14-year-old boy who has mental disorders, psychiatric disorders, falls in line somewhat. You know, he's probably committed some crimes. That's why he's in juvenile detention center as well. And generally speaking, people committing crimes at 13, 14 years old aren't always of sound mind. But anyway, so he's dealing with these issues, and he believed his toilet was possessed by a ghost because it kept flushing. Aggravating the situation, Correctional Officer James Crow walked down the hall to tell the boy through the window of the cell door, "Hey, quit flushing your toilet like that." If the boy didn't knock it off, Crow warned he'd have to restart his 24 hours in isolation. The boy pointed to the toilet, insisted it was acting by itself on its own. They said, "Nah." They said, "You're doing it." Crow responded, according to a transcript of security video. Speaking into his handheld radio, the officer said loudly enough for the boy to hear, "Restart his ISO." Upset, the boy shouted out the window at Crow. As Crow walked away, he banged on the door and pointed at the toilet. So, toilet's flushing on its own. Boy says, you know, hey, I've got, the boy's mentally unwell, thinks a ghost is doing it. You then have a guard come by and say, "Stop flushing your toilet." And the boy's trying to say, like, it's flushing on its own. I'm not doing it. And then he's in 24 hours isolation, and then they say, "We're going to punish you by restarting your 24 hours in isolation for the toilet flushing." Now, if you're like, well, this is where the story ends, you're like, geez, that's pretty bad that they would say they're restarting his isolation and not bothering to investigate or listen to him about his toilet flushing. But maybe he, says and does crazy things all the time. Maybe he's flushed his toilets a whole lot before, and maybe he's done this kind of thing. So it's not at all crazy or unsurprising that his toilet would be constantly flushing. And so it's reasonable for the guard to jump to the conclusion that the boy was doing it, not listening to him saying he's doing it on its own, and Crow saying, no, I'm restarting your isolation. They told me you were doing it, right? However, when the guard said that wasn't what was occurring. What it turns out, according to the story, was happening is for 26 minutes in the control room of the Warren Regional Juvenile Detention Center in Bowling Green, laughing guards were using a computer to remotely flush the boy's toilet over and over and over again while watching his emotional outbursts on security video. So not only are they sitting there flushing the toilet to see him get upset, they then send a guard down to torment him further, to tell him that he's restarting his time in ISO. You got a boy who's mentally ill and thinks that there's a ghost in the room flushing his toilet. You threaten to keep him locked in the room with the ghost for longer. Then you are the one flushing the toilet. You know it's flushing on its own. It's not him doing it because you did it. And did it for 26 minutes. Like, what a waste of water. But also, that is sadistic kind of behavior. That is truly, I don't know how to say this other than that is truly messed up. That's truly messed up. And there's no other good way to paint it. But this is what's occurring under Andy Beshear. This entire, I do not know how to explain how these juvenile detention centers are so poorly run consistently under Beshear. I can't explain it. I can't explain why he doesn't want to fix it. I can't explain why it hasn't been fixed. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me that this kind of behavior is allowed to continue. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooper Hour Show. Make sure you join me back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.